for joining, and good day to you. As Andrew said, I'd like to share with you a presentation where thinking about global regulatory strategies with the end in mind is a way of ensuring or at least reducing risk that the development program that you put into place for the product your company is developing will have the greatest chance of success. This particular presentation is one of a series of 5 presentations. For those of you who attended previously, you heard a talk on the integrated approach for successful drug development. I'll be speaking to you, as I said, about regulatory strategies, and then there'll be a series of 3 additional webinars that'll follow this one. The outline of my discussion is shown here. I'll start out by helping you understand the importance of developing a regulatory strategy, and then what goes into actually developing one. And once we finish going through the various elements that go into a regulatory strategy, I'm going to further expand on 3 of them. The 3 in particular are shown here, a target product profile and what that is and what goes into developing one. How agency meetings are conducted and what goes into planning for one of those. And this is applicable to an agency anywhere in the world. And then an element that's really becoming more and more of an issue to be dealt with by agencies, which is the growing globalization of patient populations that are enrolled in clinical trials, and therefore leading agencies to consider the impact of results from various ethnic groups and from various geographic areas around the world, and what that means to their own patients within their own country when determining the benefit risk of a product that leads to approval or rejection of that product. So with that, I'll start on this slide. And what this slide is really showing is that during the 15-year period of 1997 to 2011, the major global pharmaceutical companies shown on this slide had various numbers of drugs that they approved during this 15 years. And if one just takes the total amount of R&D spending that they had, which is shown in the right-hand column, between within that same time frame, you can see that they spent an enormous amount of money, in billions of US dollars, on the development of the number of products shown here in the column that I'm outlining with the arrow here. And if you just do the simple math of dividing the amount of money spent by the number of drugs that they were able to approve in that time frame, you can see that the amount of money they spent in order to produce each drug can be anywhere from $4 billion up to almost $12 billion. So any individual drug may not cost that amount of money, and there's a number of ways in which this can be calculated. But I think what this really helps us understand is that there's an enormous amount of money being spent on the development of medicines by many of the global pharmaceutical companies in the world. And the complexity of developing these drugs is getting harder and harder. Now on the next slide, despite the fact that the cost of developing drugs has increased so much over the years, this graph is showing the last 10 years worth of active INDs that have been filed with the US FDA. And as you can see, 10 years ago, there was just about 4,300 INDs that were active within the FDA, and today it's as many as over 6,000 INDs. So you can see that despite the cost of development, the number of INDs that are being opened for the development of new molecules is still growing at a rapid pace. Now contrast that with the data on this slide, where what this is showing us is the blue lines, or the circles above the green bars, are actually showing the number of new drug applications or biological licensing applications in the US that were filed for each of the years over the last 20 years. And then the green bars show you the number of those applications that were approved by FDA in those years. And you can see that it varies from year to year over the last 20 years. For 2013, the reason why there's this asterisk here is that This data came out in November of 2013 to indicate that it wasn't the full year, and the actual data is that there were 2 additional approvals that occurred. So the total number of approvals in 2013 were 27 out of the 32 applications that were filed. Now, if you look across this data set and we just do some simple averaging, for the number of NDA or BLA filings, for the last 10 years, there was on average 33 per year, or if you look at just the last 5 years, about 35. So very consistent numbers of NDAs, BLAs filed each year. And likewise, if you look at the number that were approved over the last 10 or the last 5 years on average, it's about between 26 and 28, or an average of about 80% of the NDAs or BLAs that are filed with the FDA are actually approved each year. So this is a very small number in comparison to the number of INDs. And when you think about all of the money that's invested in R&D each year by these companies, you can see that the investment is substantial, and therefore the risk to that investment is very high. And it really demonstrates the need to really think with the end in mind when developing a regulatory strategy and product development plan. Which gets us to why a regulatory strategy is actually needed. You know, if we start with the idea that agencies are not looking to not approve drugs, they're actually looking to approve new products that can help benefit patients. But they're also charged with protecting those patients and promoting those patients and their nation's public health. So they have patients' best interests in mind, and they want to make sure that what they do allow to be released onto the market with a license, that those patients are going to actually have a positive response to being on those medications. And to achieve that, they look at 3 key characteristics in their evaluation of those applications. They look at efficacy, they look at safety, which are the 2 criteria that most of us are aware of. They also look at quality. And the quality here is really related to the manufacturing of the product and making sure that the client or the sponsor of that medication can reproduce it the same way every time that they manufacture it, and that when they scale up for manufacturing, when a product is approved, that the drug that they're producing is identical to what was studied in the clinical studies that made the determination of efficacy and safety, so that they have the confidence that when patients are prescribed the drug, that the patients are going to have the same experience as was observed in those clinical trials.